ordinary meeting of the Council held on the 30th of January 2019. Can we agree those minutes? Agreed. Declarations of interest. Members have been asked to display their declarations of interest on the board at the entrance to the chamber. Members are reminded that dispensations have been granted to all those members who have applied for them. In order to deal with matters relating to the budget and to the council tax. Do any members have any further declarations? Thank you. There are no announcements this evening. Apologies. Do we have any apologies for us?
Yes, Madam Mayor, we have apologies from Councillors Checker, Elliott, Ethel, Howe, F. Miller, O'Neill, Porthouse, Heathman, D. Snowden, D.E. Snowden, Spedding, Walker, Waters, Watson, K. Ward and Alderman Arnold and Greenfield.
Thank you. Are there any further apologies? Councillor Leicestershire?
Lynn Appleby, Mayor.
Lynn Appleby? Any other apologies? Thank you very much indeed. I now call upon the Leader to move the approval and adoption of the report of the Cabinet. Leader?
I so move, Madam Mayor.
Who seconds the report?
I second the report, Madam Mayor, and reserve the right to speak on the substantive motion.
Thank you very much indeed. Leader, would you like to speak to the Cabinet report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I formally move the Revenue Budget and Capital Programme for next year. As has been the case in recent years, there is again some very positive news in respect of the investment we are making in our city. However, once again, there are also some very difficult decisions to be made in order to deliver a balanced budget. Madam Mayor, it is now 9 years since this government began imposing austerity measures on local councils, with the persistent and compound impact of those cuts on the much-needed local services which this council provides. The Chancellor, in his budget speech in November, said that austerity was coming to an end, but from a local government funding perspective, there is absolutely no evidence to support this so far, with Tory cuts still programmed in till 2021-2022 for local authorities. Since the coalition government of 2010 and the subsequent Tory government that followed, the United Kingdom has moved to be the lowest performing economy of the G7, and it is now expected that growth in Q1 of 29 will be zero, as manufacturing, construction and our service sectors continue to be badly affected by the failed mantra of austerity politics as we head towards stagnation and the possibility of stagflation rearing its ugly head again. The local government finance settlement has offered only limited additional one-off funding to help support the pressures which we are experiencing in both children's and adult social care. While the additional funding we are to receive through the Winter Pressures Grant and Social Care Grant next year is welcomed, the fact it is one-off funding does not provide an ongoing sustainable solution for the significant cost and demand pressures we are facing in social care each and every year. Out of necessity, councils across the country are overspending on children's and adults' social care. A Public Accounts Committee report published in February shows that core funding from central government has been slashed by 50% since austerity began, at the same time as demand for services has increased, the same demand being caused by the inevitable outcomes of the self-same austerity politics heaped onto the British people by the Lib Dems and Conservatives in coalition. Analysis by the Institute of Fiscal Studies published in February indicates that the Chancellor needs to find a further £5 billion of funding by 2023-24 to avoid further cuts. Yet this government continues to deny the impact which austerity continues to have on services at a local level. The perilous state of affairs will not be resolved through short-term cash injections which this government seems to favour, as it's mere sticking plasters to get Tory ministers through another headline. It is imperative to the future sustainability of local government that the spending review to be undertaken by government this year recognises the importance of all the services provided by local government. They must ensure the right level of funding is made available to support local needs. While on the one hand, this type of one-off limited additional funding is being provided, on the other, this government has cut our revenue support grant by almost £9 million for next year. That's a staggering 23% cut to a city that can least afford it. The social care precept was introduced by government 3 years ago to allow councils to raise more money locally to offset some of the cuts in government funding. But that pernicious decision just shifts the burden of payment from central government to the council taxpayer and the working poor. However, it also disadvantages councils such as ours with a low council tax base. Put simply, we cannot raise as much through council tax as councils in more affluent areas can. The government is currently reviewing the way that local government is funded and plans to move to a system of 75% retained business rates and to introduce a revised methodology for allocating the total resources available through a fair funding approach. Call me sceptical, but we'll wait and see just how fair the unfair funding approach turns out to be, given this government's record of directing funding to wealthier areas of the country in the south. Madam Mayor, it is fair to say that the compound impact of austerity has hit higher needs areas like Sunderland particularly hard. It is therefore essential that the outcomes of the fair funding review recognise the needs of the city, and the spending review recognises the severe damage which 9 years of austerity has caused to local services and to local people. These government-led changes to the way we are funded are due to be implemented from April 2020, and that is little more than a year away, yet they will not be able to tell us what the impact on our funding will be until late summer or even early autumn of this year. How on earth do they expect us to be able to do sound financial planning for 2021 when we don't know where the pitch is, never mind where the goalposts are going to be? For now though, Madam Mayor, we must focus on setting a balanced budget for next year. Since 2010, we have worked hard to protect residents and communities from the impact of the cuts, with more than £293 million already cut since austerity measures began. But we now need to find a further £25 million of cuts next year, with potentially £54 million needed to be cut by 2022. This means our ability to deliver even statutory functions will be severely put to the test, which brings with it very difficult decisions. The Council continues to work with partners and communities to make the best use of all resources available. What funding we have is being prioritised to support statutory requirements and key priorities, and to maximise the impact of other vital investments into Sunderland. As well as remodelling services and cutting costs, the Council also needs to focus on enabling the city to be self-sustainable. We therefore need to continue to invest in Sunderland's infrastructure and focus on developing the economy. If we are able to create more and better jobs and make the city more attractive to residents, visitors and investors. Madam Mayor, I am pleased to say we are proposing a capital programme of almost £169 million next year, with a further £208 million of investment planned to be spent in the following 3 years. I think this demonstrates our ambition and commitment to make our city more prosperous and self-sufficient as we move confidently into the 21st century. However, Madam Mayor, the 2019-2020 budget has once again involved very difficult choices in order to deliver the reductions of the scale required. It is once again down to the work of portfolio holders members, directors and staff that we have been able to do this, and I do warmly thank them all. The City Council has done its best to protect residents from the impact of the cuts since 2010. For next year, the Council will continue to maximise back office savings, more internal cuts, and streamline processes in order to minimise the impact on frontline services wherever possible. However, the ongoing compound impact of government cuts and significant cost pressures means that, sadly, increasingly difficult decisions do have to be made. Raising council tax is one of these very difficult decisions. The harsh fact is that we don't raise enough council tax now, and we will need to cut, if we don't raise council tax now, we will need to cut services by even more, which will only impact on the most vulnerable members of our community. We have therefore taken the difficult decision to raise council tax in order to protect services from further cuts next year. Madam Mayor, the proposal is to raise council tax by a total of 3.99%, which is within the government set referendum limit. This includes the social care precept implemented by the government to help fund adult social care pressures. As the proposed increase is below the government's limit, a referendum will not be required, and it represents an increase of £1.04 a week for the average Band D property and 70p a week for a Band A property. Madam Mayor, although this rise is not what we want, our council tax remains the lowest in the region, reflecting our continued drive to do all we can to deliver high quality services which provide strong value for money for our residents. My Cabinet colleagues will soon brief their own...
Madam Mayor, can I move an extension of the list time to the conclusion of his speech, please?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My Cabinet colleagues will soon briefly present their own individual portfolios, but first I would like to highlight some key areas which form the cornerstones of our plans for 2019-20 and into the medium term. We will ensure that we continue to protect the most vulnerable citizens within our communities through both children's and adult services provision. This commitment is reinforced by the inclusion of more than £17 million of additional funding to support cost and demand pressures, in addition to capital investment. Other budget proposals set out today demonstrate the importance we place on delivering the services and support our communities want and need. This budget includes provision of ongoing funding to support a deep clean of the city centre, funding to help work against domestic violence, extra funding to support the city's events programme, and additional funding for each of the 5 area committees to support local priorities. In addition, as I said earlier, we are investing £169 million in the city's infrastructure next year, with a further £208 million planned to be spent in the following 3 years. As a council, we are working with the private sector to encourage and facilitate development and investment. The council and all of our partners continue to invest in the regeneration of the city, with some major developments planned over the next few years. I am delighted to report that progress in developing the International Advanced Manufacturing Park continues apace, with the aim of creating over 7,000 quality jobs. And following the completion of the Northern Spire, Phase 3 of the Sunderland Strategic Transport Corridor will improve roads running from the New Weir Crossing to St James Way, opening up opportunity for development of the south side of the river. There is additional investment to help regenerate our city centre and unlock the potential of the Vaux site, with a new civic centre and public sector hub development beside Keele Square and our music, arts and cultural quarter. Plans include investment in our neighbourhoods, our cultural assets, our schools, and in facilities for those most vulnerable in our communities. In addition, there is investment in vehicles, plant and equipment to ensure our public-facing services can operate in the most efficient and effective way. These investments will help us grow our economy and make the city more resilient and attractive for residents, visitors and investors. This will all help to make Sunderland a dynamic, vibrant and healthy city through the delivery of a new, ambitious city plan, which is soon to be finalised, which will take us up to 2030 as a start. Madam Mayor, We are all entirely aware of how important financial resilience is when managing a council's finances, and I am pleased to say that the proposals before you today help support our continued financial resilience, with reserves remaining at prudent and appropriate levels for 2019-20, and we do need to be prudent in the use of those reserves. We have to recognise that the vast majority of reserves are held with specific plans and projects in mind, such as investing in the capital programme. We must also recognise that we cannot use reserves to prop up the revenue budget on an ongoing ad hoc basis, something our opposition colleagues seem to be happy to disregard. Despite what the Chancellor has said, the impact of the coalition and Tory-inspired austerity measures is continuing apace, and so we must strive to deliver ongoing and sustainable solutions for the residents of Sunderland, the people that we are elected to defend from the worst of these cuts to local services. Theresa May, Philip Hammond and Amber Rudd have all said, judge us on our record. The record stinks, Madam Mayor. We have the lowest performing economy in the G7. We are heading towards zero growth in 2019. Homelessness has doubled under their watch. Over 1 million food bank parcels going to needy families, most of whom are in work every year and rising. A 14% drop in real-term income for working people since 2010. A massive increase in child poverty. The hated and dreadful universal credit programme delivering harm across the country. A 7% drop in spending per pupil across every school in England, unless you go to a private school, of course. A massive crisis in our hospitals and adult social care, with waiting lists so large now that the embarrassed and humble Tory government have stopped measuring the scale of their failure. And, to cap it all, the UN condemnation of the United Kingdom for abuse of the disabled. We are the 6th largest economy in the world, and we stand accused of failing to help those with the greatest needs in our society, all caused by the coalition decision back in 2010 by those treacherous, not to be trusted Liberal Democrats and their Tory allies, that austerity politics, an attack on northern councils to shift money in local government from the north to Tory-supported councils in the south, was the price Liberal Democrats were happy to pay if it got them into government, ministerial pensions and elevation to the House of Lords. Thankfully, 5 years later, the electorate repaid their betrayal of the British people by voting the Lib Democrats nearly into oblivion. All of this happening, of course, while we continue to give massive tax cuts to the wealthy and big business, while getting the working poor to shoulder that burden of cost. How come the Tories always cut taxes for the wealthy when there is apparently no money around, but expect the poorest in societies to shoulder the burden of cuts to their local services? Well, we on this side of the chamber will work to protect and save people from the worst of those cuts. With that, Madam Mayor, I would like to conclude by saying that the proposals presented today are as robust and as fair as we are able to make them within the very difficult financial climate that Sunderland faces. I therefore commend to Council this evening both the revenue budget and capital programme, which continue to be underpinned by our commitment to deliver value for money and the best services possible for our fantastic city and its residents. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Leader. Before dealing with any amendments, each of the Cabinet portfolios will speak to their own portfolio. Can we start, please, with Secretary Leader?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, before I start, can I just place on record our congratulations to Sunderland Football Club for a fantastic team head to Wembley on the 31st of March. I'm sure the whole council and the whole city will be angry in that, and hopefully will bring some silverware back to the city. Madam Mayor, just briefly with regards to the Deputy Leader's portfolio, within these proposals is a continuation of our investment in the development of the International Advanced Manufacturing Park, as the Leader has outlined, with the aim of delivering additional investment into the city and creating around 7,000 jobs. We will also continue to provide financial assistance to business in the form of economic development grants to further support inward investment and job growth all across Sunderland. And we are supporting and encouraging investment in exciting plans and projects in the city centre. In addition, I am very happy to say that we have continued to invest in the Port of Sunderland, which is vitally important to the city's ongoing regeneration and considerable contribution to make. This investment in its infrastructure will ensure that it has the operational capacity to make the business sustainable going forward. That's all I wish to say at this stage, Madam Mayor, and I commend the proposals for the Deputy Leader's portfolio to Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Cabinet Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, as Cabinet Secretary, I support the budget proposals presented by the Leader of the Council. We are once again in a very difficult position as a result of the persistent underfunding of local services by central government. Once again, we are left with no option other than to make some very difficult decisions which we are legally required to do to set a balanced budget, Madam Mayor. I would like us to have worked hard to identify a balanced package of proposals as we are able to do in a very difficult financial situation which we are faced with never-ending cuts in funding from the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives since 2010. Madam Mayor, the revenue and capital proposals have been thoroughly tested to ensure we target remaining funding on the key priorities of the city. The proposals include investment in services which are clearly a priority for the communities and supporting those most in need. In respect of my own portfolio, which covers corporate services, 2019-20 will see us continue to provide corporate leadership on our budget and the medium-term financial strategy. Our residents would rightly expect back office services to take their fair share in the cuts, and we have continued to reduce those services despite significant cuts that have gone previously, Madam Mayor. However, ensuring that the Council retains its financial resilience in 2019-20 and beyond is clearly fundamental to our approach to handling the significant financial challenge we face. Madam Mayor, I think we need to pause and reflect over the thousands of staff that have left this Council since 2010 due to cuts in funding by central government, by the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives through their austerity programme. Madam Mayor, this year is no different. The Council is once again having to make redundancies to inflict a life-changing decision on them and their families. Central government to continue to have a choice, but in making that choice, continue to favour tax cuts over provisions to support the most needy in our society. That is a view not of some left-wing think tank, but of the United Nations, Madam Mayor, confirming that austerity was and remains a political choice. The financial resilience of local government is becoming increasingly difficult given the tightening of the funding position. Indeed, a recent National Audit Office report indicated that there is a heightened risk of more councils over the next 4 years falling into special measures as a result of not addressing the pressure on their budgets. Madam Mayor, this is not surprising when you look at the National Audit figures. As the Leader has already mentioned, funding to local authorities has been cut by between 2010-11 to 2017-18 by a staggering 49.1%. This is on top of the increase in demands for key services, again, that the Leader has alluded to, such as social care. The National Audit Office is rightly concerned that with no end in sight, that councils are coming under increasing pressure to reduce services to communities to pay for that social care requirements. They've actually stated, to quote them, the current trajectory for local government is towards a narrow core offer increasingly centred on social care. This is the default outcome of sustained increases in demand for social care and the tightening of resources. Madam Mayor, the situation continues, and as the Leader has mentioned, it looks like it will continue for at least the next 3 years. There will be continuing pressure on this Council to reduce the services to communities, the pay for pressures such as social care, as well as our children. To put this in context, Madam Mayor, for Sunderland, we need to remind ourselves that the impact of cuts in Sunderland has resulted in the current annual funding gap of £293,900,000 predicted by the end of March 2019. This is predicted to rise to £348.4 million over the next 3 years. Madam Mayor, we are determined that the dire predictions of the National Audit Office will not happen here in Sunderland, and it will continue to try and protect local services. We will continue to apply financial prudence, however, with a careful use of resources while being innovative and creative, and we will ensure that our medium-term financial strategy will remain robust. We'll continue to consult with our residents to ensure that resources remain are linked to their priorities for the city and for their communities. The annual audit letter from the independent external auditor once again commented on how well the council has responded to the financial pressures faced upon it. It comments that we have a proven track record of strong budget management and delivering on planned budget reductions. The letter also positively comments on our level of usable reserves and the flexibility they provide to manage the medium-term financial position. Whilst we are obviously pleased to be able to report on these positive aspects, there is no escaping the fact that the financial outlook remains extremely challenging. As the leader mentioned, the latest consultation on fair funding does not suggest a positive outcome for councils such as ours. Taken together with the spending review and the government's proposals to remove 75% of business wage retention, the 2021 looks set to be an even more difficult year for this council. The risk that this poses to the future of our services in the city cannot be overstated. We need this government to ensure a fair and equitable funding system which appropriately recognises need and the ability to raise income locally, and we continue to put our case to government. Madam Mayor, the proposals set out today reflect that we have tried to limit the impact of cuts on frontline services by again maximising frontline savings and generating additional income where possible. While we are drawing on some limited one-off resources to support the budget next year, this has been done to meet one-off expenditure and so is both prudent and measured. The budget recognises that we have to provide a long-term solution to ongoing cuts in funding. We take no pleasure in proposing to raise the council tax. However, if we don't, we will need to make further service cuts to frontline services and to progress further the concerns outlined by the National Audit Office. In making the decision to propose to raise the council tax, I'm reminded by the decision that the decision is supported by nearly 75% of respondents that took part in the consultation on our budget proposals, and almost 1 in 5 would have supported an even higher increase, Madam Mayor. With this in mind, Madam Mayor, I believe the revenue budget and capital programme represent the most balanced and appropriate way forward possible, given the very difficult financial position with which we are faced, and will therefore fully support the proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Councillor Farling, Children, Learning and Skills.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As mentioned by the leader, we are today proposing a budget for the 9th year of austerity. It is not only Sunderland Council, but councils through up and down the country that have lobbied government for more money for children and adult social care. The government have responded, but in their usual piecemeal way. Whilst the additional funding announced by the government as part of the settlement for children and adult social care is welcome, it does not address the impact sustained austerity since 2010 has had on budgets for children's services. In the face of the continued stretched budget position, the ability to deliver high-quality services to our children in the face of rising demand and costs is exceptionally challenging. Furthermore, there is no guarantee that the additional funding will be more than one-off. I really do believe that when the Director of Corporate Services told us that it may, or thought, or it maybe was even at his post, it would be an annual addition, that he had his fingers crossed behind his back. Increased demand is a national problem. The National Audit Office recently highlighted that between 2010-11 and 2017-18, referrals from children's social services increased by 7%. At the same time, child protection assessments increased by 77%. In the same period, the most expensive cases where children are taken into care have risen by almost triple the rate of population growth. Between 2014 and 15 and 2017-18, the cost of placement has risen by more than 22%. As a result, the cost of children in care is rising at a rate that is unprecedented. Local authorities are budgeted to spend £4.2 billion on looked after children in 2018-19, which is £350 million 2017-18. In Sunderland in recent years, the numbers that looked after children has risen from 531 in April 2017 to 605 in January 2019. The chair of the Safeguarding Board, St Paul Ellens, is of the firm belief that there is a causal link with poverty. You must remember that in Sunderland, in some wards, children in poverty, the rate of children living in poverty is as high as 40%. The position in Sunderland is even more challenging at this time of rising demand. We also face difficulties in recruiting and retaining qualified social workers, which again is a national problem, but a particularly significant regional issue. A stable and high-performing workforce is the key ingredient to driving up quality whilst managing cost and demand. Steps have been taken to grow and support the TSP workforce. A new practice model to build on the strengths within families and reduce the need for statutory intervention is currently being rolled out. In finding the required savings in my portfolio area, we must be mindful of the national upward trajectory of demand and the level of improvement that it's been possible to achieve to date within our children's services, and the concerns around the impact of any further austerity on vulnerable families. That said, we cannot ignore the requirement to set and deliver a sustainable budget for the future. Within my portfolio, the children's services budgets are intended to both meet the financial challenges and seek to continue to develop strong and responsive services for the children and young people of our city. And I draw Council's attention to the new foster care strategy, which provides additional fees for carers who will be supported through an in-depth training to provide for those children with more complex needs, avoiding the need for the more expensive placements in specialist settings, which no matter how good, can never fully replicate a caring family home. As part of the 2019-20 budget, the Council will make an additional investment of nearly £10 million in the Children's Services revenue budget to help meet demand and cost pressures. As mentioned earlier, this is a national issue, but in Sunderland it's magnified because of low income and poverty. I am delighted that there is additional capital investment with a new replacement school planned for Willowfields and further investment in Derwent Hill, our outdoor education and training centre. A vibrant city needs good schools with good buildings, and I intend that we will continue to replace our outdated stock for good outcomes for our children and young people. Despite this additional investment, in the face of rising demand and challenges in the workforce, the Children's Services budget for 2019-20 has, along with other portfolio areas across the Council, an extremely challenging cost reduction target of £5 million, which will require innovative, sustainable and creative ways of managing costs while managing down demand. Madam Mayor, with this in mind, I would conclude by saying we will continue to manage the Children's Services budget to the very best of our ability, and I would commend the proposals to my portfolio. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Farthing. Councillor Kelly, Culture and Communities.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, along with other portfolio holders, we've certainly been through the ringer, and I'd like to thank the staff from both the communities and the cultural elements of the Council for their support in putting the proposal together, which I think is exciting, but obviously within the guidelines of the budget we've been set. In relation to next year's budget, the proposal for community and culture arises from work undertaken over the last year aimed at strengthening the cultural offer available within the city. As a result of this work, and as my colleagues have already said, additional £500,000 will be provided within the budget to support the events programme across the city. Additional funding to £500,000 will also be included to each of the 5 area committees in order to support local community projects in that and to strengthen the neighbourhood plan. The budget will see cultural offer developed to meet our ambition to create a dynamic, vibrant and healthy city, as mentioned by the leader earlier. Building on the success of 2018, we want to grow the city's reputation as an event city and strengthen the overall cultural offer. The invigorated cultural offer will see more visitors and more residents participating in cultural activities and events and help establish Sunderland as a tourist destination and will generate significant economic benefits to the city, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to say that the Council, along with partners and stakeholders, will continue to build the reputation for delivering high-profile, first-class events and a vibrant cultural offer. The breadth and depth of the cultural offer in Sunderland is vast. Activities range from arts, libraries and music through to museums and heritage, and participation in sport to world-class spectator events. The budget therefore includes significant capital investment focused in particular on the development of the community football clubs, which have seen a record investment come to Sunderland and a strong relationship between ourselves, the FA and the Premier League. We continue to invest, Madam Mayor, on the Sunderland Museum Winter Gardens as a priority for our city. It is a well-respected visitor attraction within the city and regularly bats well above its weight. Madam Mayor, as my colleagues have emphasised, we are once again faced with a very challenging financial context. It is becoming increasingly difficult to deliver even statutory services. However, we have worked hard to ensure there remains a vibrant and inclusive cultural and wellness offer for all ages in the city, and it appears that the city which supports the city's economic growth and regeneration. Madam Mayor, just before I conclude, I would highlight the fact that we are in the process of moving to invest in local communities and give councillors the opportunity to work with people. Under the neighbourhood management plan, there are plans in place for the neighbourhoods and the communities to become involved in a lot of the work that we're undertaking. It's no longer going to be a top-down approach, it's going to be a bottom-up approach. And I have to thank all of the area committees, particularly the area chairs, for their help and support as we've developed this plan through. With that, Madam Mayor, I would like to commend the budget proposals from the Community and Cultural Portfolio.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Amy Wilson, Environment and Transport.
Thank you. Madam Mayor, I would support the concerns from my colleagues in relation to the significant financial challenge which this Council faces as a result of the compound impact of funding cuts and unfunded cost pressures over 9 long years. This has inevitably impacted on the much-needed local services which this Council provides, including those within my own environment and transport portfolio. As my colleagues have said, we continue to make very difficult decisions, meaning that our ability to deliver anything beyond our basic statutory functions is becoming even more difficult. Madam Mayor, the proposals before us today have been developed to minimise the impact on frontline services as far as possible. There has been focus on maximising the commercial opportunity of services, which includes some generation from the expansion of measures in the parking plan and exploring potential wider trading opportunities. It is fair to say that the services in my portfolio have, in the past, suffered cuts as a result of the austerity measures. However, over the past 2 years, the Council has listened to the feedback from our residents about what is important to them, and we have made significant reinvestment to support place-based services provision in order to improve outcomes for our residents. I am happy to say that once again we are demonstrating that we listen to what they say. This budget includes an additional allocation of £300,000 on an ongoing basis to enable an improved intensive street cleaning regime within the city. In addition, my portfolio provides for more than £130 million in capital investment across the city over the next 4 years. This includes investment in the highways infrastructure, street lighting, coastal defences and investment in our frontline services infrastructure to enable efficient and effective delivery of services. Therefore, Madam Mayor, I support the budget proposals for the Environment and Transport portfolio and commend the further investment in frontline services. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson. The Health and Social Care Budget, the portfolio holder is Dr. Walker, will be presented by Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, in the absence of Councillor Walker, who is away at a very important national conference, I will take us through the proposals for the Health and Social Care portfolio. Firstly, I would like to set some national context in relation to adult social care. The Local Government Association recently stated that the current system of social care is unsustainable and will buckle under the weight of demand. With people living longer, increases in costs and decreases in funding, adult social care is at breaking point. Over recent years, relative to other services, councils have protected adult social care, but the scale of the overall funding picture for local government as a whole means that adult social care services alone still face a £3.6 billion funding gap by 2025, just to maintain existing standards of care, by the Mayor as reported in today's Daily Telegraph. The sad and likely consequences of this are more and more people are being unable to access quality and reliable care and support, which enables them to live a more independent and fulfilling life. I am of the firm opinion, therefore, that this is something that the Government must address in its Green Paper on social care in the forthcoming spending review. Worryingly, the additional funding provided by Government as part of this funding settlement, whilst welcome, is woefully short in plugging the gap and is not long-term or a sustainable solution to the problem. We need adequate support to get the system back on its feet rather than just another sticking plaster. Turning now to the budget proposals for health and social care. Proposals arise from the work undertaken over many months to develop a service offer that meets assessed need in the most cost-effective way. The proposals set out contribute to supporting an ageing population with an increasing number of adults with mental health issues or more complex learning disability needs. These pressures, along with those experienced by our NHS partners, which have a direct impact on the cost of adult social care they need, needs to be balanced with the need to continue to deliver positive outcomes for the most vulnerable people in our city. Almost £7 million of additional funding has been provided for within the revenue budget for 2019-20. This will support investment in services, help to meet the cost of additional demand and address the impact of the national living wage on the cost of services we need to buy from social care providers. Reductions are required to support the additional investment the Council is providing next year. These will be achieved by continuing to meet the needs in the most cost-effective manner, including through the use of assistive technology. Madam Mayor, I am pleased to say that this Council will continue to ensure that residents receive the relevant level of care they require and that they will continue to seek to improve outcomes for the most vulnerable members of our community. It is clear that the financial position moving forward is extremely challenging and the proposals put forward today represent a balanced response to current circumstances. Madam Mayor, with that, I would commend the budget proposals for health and social care to the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Porthouse's portfolio housing and regeneration will be presented by Councillor Morley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, the budget proposals before Council today include over the next 4 years, with plans in place to invest over £61 million on a range of schemes. As a Council, we are working closely with partners to deliver on our aim of making Sunderland a dynamic city with an improved employment and housing offer. We are working closely with registered social landlords to replace and increase affordable homes across Sunderland, and these proposals will also see £3 million invested to return empty properties back into use. In addition, we will also develop specialist accommodation for homeless people with the most complex needs. Importantly, we are working to boost regeneration across the city from the city centre to IAMP and beyond. These are investments by Labour in the strategic development of our city, which over time will bring that all-important boost to our local economy. Madam Mayor, with that, I would like to commend the budget proposals for the housing and regeneration portfolio to Council as laid out in the agenda pack. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Morley. Next, we will deal with amendments to the budget proposals moved by the Leader. Notice has been received of the proposed amendments, and by now all Council members should have received a copy. I will remind Council that a recorded vote will be taken on each amendment, and then a single vote on the substantive motion. We will deal with the majority opposition group's amendment first. Before the motion is formally moved, I understand that Councillor Oliver wishes to delete the word biannual and replace it with biennial in relation to the air show. Councillor Oliver, is that correct? Councillor Oliver, will you please move the amendment to the revenue budget by reading it out?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the motion. Should we do that? Sorry. Yes, of course. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I can assure you it adds up even if the English was a little bit iffy. So. We propose savings, reductions and a revenue transfer of £2.02 million. I'll set out in more detail in my speech later exactly how, but the motion reads as follows: to delete £10,000 meals after full council meetings for councillors, to delete £171,000 from the members' allowances budget, to delete £180,000 from the trade union facility time, to delete £50,000 from contingencies in relation to the Spice Girls concert, to delete £9,000 from advertising in Community Vibe magazine, to delete £507,000 for the air show this year, to delete £500,000 from the increase in the area committee's budget, and to increase revenue from the enforcement of litter, fly tipping and dog filing fines by £100,000, and to increase parking revenue by £303,000, and then to transfer from the general reserves of £170,000. That, therefore, Madam Mayor, will come to £101,900,000 to limit the council tax rise to 1.99%, and also leave £120,000 with which we propose to create 5 park warden posts. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Francis, do you second the motion?
I second the motion.
Councillor Oliver, would you like to speak to the amendment?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, the Conservative group is the only group on the council that is seeking to reduce the amount of rise in the council tax. In fact, we will cut the proposed council tax rise of the Labour group in half, returning £27 a year to the Band D property council tax payers. Madam Mayor, whilst we accept that the social care precept and 1% of the rise is necessary, we feel that the rest of it is an unnecessary tax rise, and it is better to return it to the hard-pressed taxpayers of the city. Therefore, we are focused on cutting waste and raising more revenue. As for the specific items, the first one, we would delete the £10,000 budget for meals after council meetings for councillors. Now, of course, we've already had this out, and I'm sure Councillor Miller would have been absolutely delighted with the heading in the Echo the next day that said scoffing. I'm not sure if it was scoffing as in eating stuff or scoffing at the taxpayer to the tune of £10,000. But we have already had a debate on that. These meals, actually, I didn't realise, do come to £10 each for each councillor, so it's not exactly cheap. But, you know, as I'll make the point later, we really can't have the Labour councillors saying everything's got to be cut to the bone, there isn't a penny for anything, but there's £10,000 to feed the councillors after meetings. It really doesn't add up. The second thing is we will reduce members' allowances budget. The members' allowances budget comes to more than £1 million every year. We propose cuts, which we have given to the remuneration panel, and do include cuts to Conservative councillors' allowances as well, of course. We would remove 25% from all leadership roles, 50% from committee chairs, and 100% from the policy assistants. And that would trim in, we feel, the worst excesses of the councillors' allowances scheme. I think, in sympathy really with what a lot of the people in the city think, that we should be sharing in the reductions to the council's budget. We would also reduce the trade union facility time. The trade union facility time budget is, of course, £210,000 this year. Now, as a trade union member myself, I'm very much in favour of the reasonable time that trade union representatives get off to fulfil their duties. But it is, of course, a link between the trade union facility time with the council and the money that these said unions give to the Labour Party. What goes around comes around. So really, we would reduce it to what we think is a reasonable level, to leave actually £30,000 in that budget, which is enough for one full-time member of staff to be a full-time trade union representative. We were, of course, told many years ago that the trade union facility time budget would reduce. As the need was less, it would reduce. But that never has really happened, and I think possibly giving rise to some suspicions about the relationship between the council, the councillors, and the trade union. Some of the councillors, of course, sponsored by those trade unions. Next, we would...
I think that's defamatory, Madam Mayor. I think it should be taken back.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll defer to your advice and withdraw that comment.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay. Maybe I should have explained it in more careful detail, but we'll move on. We would delete from contingencies £50,000, which of course is the Spice Girls concert. Now, I know Councillor Miller is getting a reputation for when he's in a hole to get his spade out and dig a bit further. I can't quite believe that you would go to the press and try and defend this yourself. But again, it's another thing that we've had out in the past. So I thought instead, I spent this morning looking at Spice Girls lyrics, and I found three of the...
I cannot wait for this.
I found three of the most appropriate Spice Girls songs to sum up why we should delete the £50,000. They have apparently, I've not heard of these songs actually, but I also read that apparently the Spice Girls were very linked to Tony Blair and Cool Britannia in the 1990s. That's another reason for cutting the money from them. But yeah, I'll not sing them. I'll spare you that. One of their songs was called Denying. Well, I think we deny the reality of giving money to sponsor, to support a concert, really, that could very, very easily have found the money somewhere else from the football club or from the price of the ticket. So Councillor Miller is in denial. The second one, they also had a song called Never Give Up on the Good Times. And I think when they come to Sunderland Council, that's what they'll be singing, because no other council in the country has decided to sponsor them. And finally, they also had a song called Right Back At You. And I think Councillor Miller might find the backlash a little bit later when the council taxpayers find out that they are paying for this. Next, we would delete advertising in Community Vibe. We all know that we used to have these magazines that were little more than town hall pravdas, full of smiling Labour councillors just up for re-election. It's now morphed into buying a few pages of council Community Vibe. The same sort of problem, really, and essentially, you know, if you want to do that, if you want to advertise and get yourselves re-elected, then pay for it yourselves from your own political funds. I remember the former MP, Chris Mullen, of course, he never took his £10,000 communication allowance. He never spent it because he felt it was wrong. And he felt that if he wanted to advertise and put out leaflets, then the Labour Party could fund that himself. So how times have changed. Next one, we would delete the funding for the air show. Now this is appearing in the papers today. I need to make it clear what we would do is we would delete the funding for the air show. We would not delete the air show. You can have the air show if you want. Though there was, I did pick up quite a little bit of negativity in the big survey the council did with residents about it. We're all in favour of air shows, whether they occur once a year, once every 2 years, or even twice a year. But don't think we get the red hours that often. But of course the point is here, yes, pump prime these events, get them going. But years and years later, decades later, really that should have moved on, and that should be paying for itself through sponsorship or through the revenue of it. And it's about time that that happened. It's about time that we did more to get more sponsorship in, so that these are not a drain on the council tax. Yes, of course we welcome the money that comes in for business, but it shouldn't be always coming back to the council taxpayer. Next, we would delete the increase in the area committee's budget. A very large increase was proposed, £500,000 for the area budgets. I think Councillor Dixon will talk later about this, so I won't say too much, but essentially we would be pleased with the budget as it is. So it's not a cut, we're just not agreeing to your £500,000 extra for that. Next, we would raise revenue by £100,000 for enforcement. Now that would mean we would probably need about 1,000 fines every year. Now that I think is a reasonable prospect. In Newcastle they have, I think, about 3,000 or 4,000 fines every year. It brings in a lot of money. Last year we had 1 fine for dog fouling, 14 fines for littering, and 35 fines for fly tipping. So still, despite increased efforts, and despite more people, we are still way behind. So our ambition would be to get fines into 4 figures next year, and therefore bring in £100,000 in revenue. We would increase parking revenue as well, and Councillor Wood is going to speak on that in a second. We would also finally take £170,000 from the general reserve. Now, Councillor Miller says you can't, rely on the reserves. Okay, fine, you spend it, it's spent. I would notice that I think that several years ago our general reserves were only about £7 million. They're now about £12 million. And I think the general public will say, hang on a minute, £12 million in your general reserves, and you're talking as if we haven't got 2 pennies to rub together. So I think it's perfectly fair to take actually what is a very, very small amount and reduce those general reserves to support services. With that, of course, we will be able to cut Labour's proposed council tax rise in half, return the money to the people who want it instead of it being wasted, and also we would fund 5 park wardens across the city that Councillor Mullen is going to talk about in a minute. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Oliver. Does anyone else wish to speak?
Councillor Ward, Councillor Mull, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Kelly, Councillor Stewart, Councillor McKnight.
Councillor Dixon, did you indicate you wanted to speak?
Councillor Oliver suggested it. That's the Labour.
Why do you know what you're doing, my talking?
All right. Councillor Ward, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wonder if I can begin by asking a question, Madam Mayor. I don't think we're required to give notice of questions, are we, at these meetings? I just wonder if we could be told why Councillor Porthouse isn't present this evening, for example. Councillor Walker's absence was explained when another colleague of his presented his budget. But there's been no explanation for Councillor Porthouse not being here. I'm not sure whether he's joined the TIGGers, the independent group, Madam Chairman. Some of the views that he expressed are perhaps fairly close to theirs, or whether they might even have been suspended from the other side, Madam Mayor, but I think we're entitled to know. Anyway.
Councillor Wood, I don't know. He put his apologies in, and I will know more than that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you. I'd like to refer, I think, really to page 289 of the estimates that we have tonight, insofar as one can refer to a page these days, and it's reference 11, I suppose, line 11, the reference to parking services there, which shows that during the current financial year, a surplus of £999,000 was made, and next year we're expecting a surplus of £1,200,000. Now, that increase is welcome, certainly, but I think there are other issues that we need to take on board. So clearly I'm supporting the amendment this evening, Madam Mayor, because I believe in keeping taxes down as much as possible. And limiting council tax, the increase in council tax to 2% rather than 4%, for example, is clearly, I think, in keeping with that belief. And I've indicated already that I want particularly to speak in support of increasing the revenue that the council receives from parking services. I welcome, certainly, that after many deficit years, Madam Mayor, we're now in modest surplus. But other cities and towns are still able to earn higher surpluses. And of course, you don't do that by driving parking charges ever upwards. I share, Madam Mayor, and I think my colleagues share, the view of the city's civic society, which about 18 months ago undertook a survey of city car parking usage. And it found that the main city centre car parks were significantly underused, even at weekends, and it recommended a simpler, more attractive parking charges policy. Simpler, more attractive pricing structure for car parking charges. Now certainly I would keep the free after 3 on Thursdays approach, but I would commend 2 other examples of parking charges, one in Sunderland and one elsewhere. If we look at Cowan Terrace in St Michael's Ward, Madam Mayor, the ward that Councillor Dixon, Councillor Oliver I represent, if we look at the car parking Cowan Terrace, clear notice there indicates that it's £1 an hour and £3 for 24 hours. That's the maximum. So it's simple. It seems to me the charges are reasonable, and that car park, Madam Mayor, is regularly full. It certainly was this morning. And the other example I'd like to quote is of South Shields on the seafront, where it's a penny a minute for the first 10 minutes, and then £1 to park all day. Now that's also, it seems to me, simple, clear, and nobody, I think, could object really to such reasonable charges. But in our car parks, on the other hand, prices are really all over the place. They vary from car park to car park. Some are below £1 an hour, 8 pence, 90 pence, for example. Others are above £1.10, £1.39. And all involve more complex calculations than, for example, South Shields or Cowan Terrace, as I mentioned. And sometimes, in some of the car parks, the chargings apply on Sundays and bank holidays, and sometimes they don't. There's no consistency, Madam Mayor, and I think you need it if you're going to encourage people to come into the city on a regular basis, use our car parks, and patronise our businesses. Now, with a simpler pricing structure, I do believe that we would make car parking in Sunderland a more attractive proposition. And I believe increased numbers of motorists, and of course their passengers as well, because they probably won't simply come alone. More motorists, more passengers would come into the city, increasing revenues for both the council for the car parking and also businesses, of course, in the shops, the restaurants, and whatever. It would be a win-win situation, I think, for all. And perhaps I can also make this comment, Madam Mayor, it relates to car parks, that I think lifts and other facilities in the car parks also need to be reliable. The lifts at the Sunnyside multi-storey car park, for example, I think are twinned with the railway station escalator. When my family and I go to the cinema and we park the car in the car park, we look out for the lift not working notices, and we're rarely disappointed. So I hope that will be taken up as well. Now, cheaper and simpler pricing structures don't necessarily mean less revenue. People will see that as better value, and it will encourage use, increasing revenue in the process because it's a much more user-friendly approach. Happy to support the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been asked to speak about cemeteries, which I'm not going to read too much into. The Conservatives are proposing to delete the rise in area committee money to reinstate 5 park and cemetery wardens, each costing £24,000. Per year. These wardens would have responsibility for parks and cemeteries across the city, including locking them at night and opening them on the morning, thereby keeping out people who wish to do them harm during the night. They would also play a part in helping the council to be more proactive in issuing dog fouling penalties, particularly since, as Councillor already said, the council has only issued one in the last year. In Barnes Park last year, just days before the West Area event, a gang of teenagers actually ripped the railings from Barnes Park's bandstand and used them as swords, intimidating several members of the public. And similarly, the Conservative candidate for St Peter's this year has recently spoken to residents about their concerns following an arson incident in Roker Park, and they feel equally as strongly about securing their park as some Barnes residents do. Aside from the parks, though, and I think there was a gasp of surprise over the other side, I'm especially pleased that my Conservative colleagues supported the idea that these wardens should also have cemeteries included in their remit. Like most people, I feel a general sense, Madam Mayor, frustration when inconsiderate people use cemeteries for things like dog walking, and Bishop Weymouth Cemetery is used for drivers to get easy access to Chester Road. But far worse than this was in 2017, when the Children's Cemetery in Bishop Weymouth was vandalised, including with a motorbike driving over several of the graves. Madam Mayor, I have a brother who was buried in that cemetery, and I don't know if anyone has ever experienced the dread of approaching a child's grave, wondering whether or not it's been desecrated, but it's a unique and uniquely awful feeling. When we got there, it fortunately hadn't, but a grave next to it, which has a baby, her parents have not actually visited the grave in the 2.5 decades that she where it had been destroyed and had clear imprints of the motorbike's tyre in it, and it had pulled apart what was already a very modest grille. While I'm not entirely hopeful that this amendment will pass, Madam Mayor, I will support it, and I hope that the Council Leader will consider what I've outlined here for something in a future budget, because people do feel very strongly, particularly surrounding the damage done and misuse of the cemetery. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mullen. Councillor Hodson?
Thank you, Mayor Sunderland. Listening to Robert outline the Conservative budget amendment, there are some aspects of it which feel very familiar, and certainly give me a sort of sense of deja vu of Lib Dem proposals in the last couple of years. I just wish that the Conservatives had spoken up about their concerns about free meals, members' allowances, Spice Girls concerts, Wide magazine, area committees, beforehand and in committees when it might have helped, but they can rest assured that there is plenty of room on our coattails. There are a couple of things that have come up in this meeting so far that have caught my attention. I was amused to hear Graham Miller say that he criticised the opposition groups for making some small use of the reserves, especially when on page 152 of our budget book the Labour Council is making a one-off use of its reserves, actually quite a substantial one at 1.25 million. You know, there is good reason for us to be using reserves when it can be done sensibly and without a long-term impact. Likewise, actually, I share, it won't surprise anyone here, I share Rob Lawler's concerns about the way the allowances, particularly the special responsibility allowances, have been abused at this council. Indeed, it's been disappointing in this meeting that two portfolio holders are not here, and yet their two deputies are unable to deputise for them. It makes you wonder exactly what we're paying you for. At which point, I have to say that I am willing to support the Conservative amendment. I believe the Lib Dem group will as well. But we do have reservations actually about the trade union facility time in particular. But we do recognise that in principle this is, broadly speaking, an attempt to redress council spending and shift a saving to the residents of the city. So even if we can't, even if we do disagree with the way they've gone about it, we can't argue with the spirit. So we'll be supporting the amendment, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hodson. Councillor Kelly?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, you might be surprised to hear I'm speaking against this amendment, based on the fact that it has no reality about it whatsoever. Delete meal allowance £10,000. I'm not really sure it is the full £10,000. I'd be more impressed if the Conservatives had sort of said that a few weeks ago and stuck by and didn't go in for a meal after the vote. Then that would be much better. Reduce members' allowance.
Point of personal explanation.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I may make a point of personal explanation. Since the amendment that we put down on the meals at the council meetings, Conservative councillors pay for their own meals, and if they go into the restaurant tonight, that was what they will do. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you for that explanation. Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again,
withdrawing that remark of this.
no, I won't withdraw because you've done it for many, many years, Councillor, so don't start. Right, we'll move on to the next one. Reduction in members' allowances. It's a long, long time ago since there was any increase in members' allowance, but I think the Conservative group actually beat the Labour group in accepting the portion of the representations that came through the committee. There has been absolutely nothing stopping you the entire time you handed back your allowances, and the same goes with the Liberal Democrats. They could have actually handed their allowances back at any particular time they chose to. You haven't done that. Reduced trade union facility time. Madam Mayor, we have been through such a turmoil, and the reality is almost, I think it's 3,500 staff have gone. Sorry, 7,000 members of staff have gone. That has involved a heck of a lot of trade union time and working with people to try and keep them as safe as we can, get them across the line, trying to find them new jobs. Delete from the contingencies of the Spice Girls concert. Madam Mayor, that is paid by numerous councils across the spectrum. The FK for things. Thank you. Madam Mayor, I demand an apology from Councillor Brown as he called me a lie, Madam Mayor.
That's twice now it's called a colleague of mine a liar in the chamber. They're completely unacceptable.
Right, we'll carry on. No more comments like that, Councillor.
Okay, thank you again, Madam Mayor. So, Spice Girls, it's an income generator. There are lots of people employed by the Stadium of Light. There are people around the area that will be transported to and from the area. It will generate an income. Delete advertising in the community vibe. Councillor Oliver said it's an opportunity for Labour councillors to get their face in there prior to election. Madam Mayor, Tory councillors tried doing something and work with the public. You can get your face in the paper. It isn't a political one. It's about good news stories from councillors who work with their communities. That's all I can say on that one. Delete the air show, and I'll accept the amendment. Madam Mayor, 507,000. It actually costs a lot more than that to put the air show on. We recoup a heck of a lot of the cost through opportunities through catering and hospitality, which we sell, and try to do it that way. We've looked at people coming in and sponsoring. It's a huge area to do. During austerity, there's been a lot less sponsorship about, so we've been unsuccessful in that. However, we have taken away a number of things from the air show, and in fact, Madam Mayor, I think you were there when we were there last year. Once we started charging councils, I didn't see any Conservatives turn up that year. So I could have been wrong on that one. I might have missed them. But when we started charging, they stopped coming. Delete the increase in the area community budgets. This just goes to show how narrow-minded they are. The area budget is designed so that councillors from all sides can work with their communities. It's designed to help them help their communities with projects that they need to carry across the line. I'm particularly proud that we have put an extra 500,000 into the area communities, Madam Mayor, because I think this will work with some of the weakest groups we've got in the city, and I think it gives the councillors an opportunity to work with those groups and to support them. And again, very, very supportive of their area communities, Madam Mayor. Increase revenue from enforcement lighting. I'll nip and buy a lottery ticket now, shall I? Because we've got no guarantees on that. It's an aspirational figure, and what that actually means is bring people in who are going to jump on you from a great height and not take any explanation. So a child of the 8 drops a sweet wrapper. Some hairy bloke from the enforcement agent will come out and want an £80 fine on the child. You know, so that's it. Increased parking revenue. I'm a bit confused by that one, because in one sense it sounds like council want to say carry it down, carry a fixed price, and always want to increase the parking revenue as well. It doesn't work both ways. General reserves, Madam Mayor, yes, there has been a slight increase in general reserves, but general reserves are those that have money coming in from government for specific projects and don't necessarily are there just for us to play with. So for that reason, Madam Mayor, I'll be opposing this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the first couple of words from Councillor Oliver sort of reminded us of it's the same old story from the Conservatives. Cut in waste was the first two words that he spoke when he raised these proposals in his budget. Madam Mayor, I need to remind him that this council has lost £293.9 million annually from its budget. I don't think there's any waste left, Madam Mayor. But in relation to some of the specific items, if we first of all deal with the meals issue, this was raised, I think it was just 5 weeks ago, Madam Mayor, and a democratic decision was made in this council It's quite clear that Councillor Oliver and his colleagues don't believe in democracy, and I'm quite sure we'll get this next month and the month after that, if that's their view on democracy. I think it's right that members, after a hard day's at work, have the opportunity for a meal 10 times a year. That's not excessive. In relation to reducing members' allowances, Madam Mayor, I think the Tories are quite similar to the Liberal Democrats when it comes to this, in that consistently, nationally, when they're in opposition, they oppose the introduction or an expansion and increase of members' allowances. But when they get into power, they suddenly change their minds. And there was an example recently, in the last few days, Redditch Borough Council, where for years they've been opposing increases in such allowances, but as soon as they got in, they gave themselves a 300% pay rise. And, well, that was overall that. I mean, the leader didn't quite get that. The leader, Mike Dormer, only got a whopping 150% pay rise, and that's him there with his smiling little face, very happy with his pay rise, Madam Mayor. Another example, again, of what happens when the Conservatives get into power, Madam Mayor, is Basildon. Basildon, again, the Tories there were in opposition, raising issues about the cost of allowances, but as soon as they got into power, they suddenly decided to increase the number of special responsibility allowances so they could give their friends in their party jobs to do that paid a lot of money. Thank you. In relation to our current opposition here, and long may they remain the opposition, thank you very much, is that I suppose the proof is what they are currently doing presently. Yet they do believe fundamentally that allowances are wrong or allowances are too high. Do they give up their allowances? No. Do they give up part of their allowances? No. So there's no real principle here. It's a case of it's just electoral opportunism. In relation to the trade union facility time, Madam Mayor, once again it is another usual trick of the Conservatives to attack trade unions. It reminds me of the attempts when the Conservatives put the Trade Union Act through Parliament. A lot of what Councillor Oliver is proposing was originally in that bill, but because of opposition in Parliament had to be taken out. But clearly the Conservatives haven't changed their view with regards to their anti-trade union views. And finally, can I link the air show, the Spice Girls and the parking proposals together, Madam Mayor? Take the annual air show. Madam Mayor, this is the highlight of the summer. It's a free weekend carnival, stalls, rides, and of course the old plane even does whiz pie when it's not raining. But it's a family day out, and I look forward to that. And it's something that the Tories want to take away, because the reality is if you take the funding away, you take the air show away. That is the reality. Madam Mayor, the added bonus of this is that it puts Sunderland not just on the map nationally but internationally, and brings millions of pounds from visitors to our shops, to our pubs and to our hotels in the city. As for the Spice Girls, I see nothing wrong in the council helping to facilitate major concerts. Bringing such acts such as the Spice Girls to Sunderland is something to shout about. I don't know if there's a song in that somewhere, but never mind. Okay. I know my daughter can't stop shouting about it. And as the problems with the Tories, Madam Mayor, it's true the old saying that they know the cost of everything but the value of nothing. We should be pressing the council and the leader on how we can facilitate more such events so that the residents of our city can see major international bands rather than always having to trail through to Newcastle. Or is that actually what the Conservatives and the Tories want us to do, Madam Mayor? The cost will be made up again by the income that the city will generate from the visitors, Madam Mayor. And finally, the car parking. After moving the smile away from my daughter regarding the Spice Girls, and to be honest, the smile away from my grandchildren by stopping the air show, they want to, I'm not quite sure what they want to do with car parking charges. I don't know whether they're going to increase them, reduce them, or what. I think there's a lot of confusion over there. I think that clear confusion is going to upset my better half in relation to her use of the car when she's parking. So that's going to make me a grumpy individual and a grumpy portfolio holder. And it's quite clear that the Conservatives just want to have a grumpy city to deal with. Madam Mayor, their proposals are simply taking the sun out of Sunderland for all the joy that they will be removing from this city by their proposals. I can certainly see with the car parking proposals that there's going to be a few leaflets in the next few weeks, but their colour will be a deep shade of red rather than a pale blue with regards to what your proposals are for car parking. Finally, they propose to use the savings to prioritise a reduction in council tax. I think what a cheek to make that such a suggestion. No doubt it will make a headline, and no doubt it will be in your leaflets, but I think we remind ourselves the reason the council tax has to go is the current funding gap of this council. Money that the Liberal Democrats and Conservatives have stolen from this city to fund tax cuts for their friends in big business down, I'll say it again, £293.9 million. That is £293.9 million annually needed to bring services back to the levels we enjoyed in 2010 and reduce the charges back to the levels they were in 2010. Madam Mayor, we can all play with statistics, and that's what the Conservatives and the Tories are doing here with their proposals. The council tax raises £92.5 million. The government funding gap that they've stolen from us is £293.9 million. Clearly one is bigger than the other, and I'll let them do their math. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor McNaught.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As you pointed out, I will not be supporting this amendment. Councillor Oliver described his proposals as cutting waste. I'm sure the employees of this council will not regard the council union representatives' facility time as waste. I'm almost certain of that. One paid union member for, let me have me on this, Michael, 3,000 employees? Roughly. One paid union representative for 3,000 employees. Really? Is that logical? Is that sensible? This is just an example again of the Conservatives showing breathtaking contempt for our workforce and working people. It's just ingrained. They're attempting to hamstring the ability of unions to represent our staff when they're at the most vulnerable and when they're at the lowest end. I've been there when I've needed representation from a union representative, and I tell you what, they are a godsend. And actually say to people, actually, should we cut back on this? Really? Facility time, of course, is protected by law. Reps are entitled to reasonable paid time off. I just repeat that. Paid time off to do their union duties and their responsibilities. As specified in, and the legislation around this, is the Trade Union and Labour Consolidation Act 1992, Section 168 and 170, and the Employment Act 2002, Section 43, and in current ACAS guidance. Deleting this from our budget proposal could potentially mean we're breaking the law. I'm a prepared accounting staff. We need to make sure that our staff are adequately represented. It's a basic right. So I'll just keep it short and brief, Madam Mayor. That was the main point I just wanted to make. But just one other thing to finish. On Councillor Oliver's guilty secret about Spice Girls and their lyrics and their songs, I'd just like to conclude. The way the two parties are working at the minute, obviously with the collusion, it's kind of when two become one. These wannabe politicians should just stop. So just because one of them is a secretly politically motivated gimmick and is utterly contemptible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm. Councillor Francis, you reserve the right to speak. Do you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's all right, that's not all the speech. I'll attempt to be brief, Madam Mayor. This is a good, sound amendment, one worthy of serious consideration this evening, and hopefully adoption by this council. The majority of people in Sunderland will, I am sure, give it their approval,
as it seeks to reduce the increase in council tax without reducing services. Indeed, it seeks to improve some services. This will make people happy, not grumpy. I draw Council's attention to 4 laudable points, all worthy of our unanimous approval. No public service will be reduced. The council tax increase proposed by Labour is reduced to a more manageable level. It demonstrates to the electorate that elected members are prepared to take a hit in their pockets, and it seeks to make Sunderland a safer place by reintroducing park wardens. Let's look at that third point, dealing with the reduction in money received by councillors. Recent letters in the Sunderland Echo, comments made on the doorstep and raised at ward surgeries show that there is a wish among the electorate for councillors to demonstrate, by way of a reduction in the number of paid posts and in allowances, that they are willing to make a contribution to the savings that they, the electorate, are having to make. So, the council group is leading from the front on this one by not receiving one of its SRAs to which it is entitled, but is still doing the work it entails. And I especially recommend this part of the amendment to the Chamber. I hope that Councillors Kelly and Stewart will note what we're doing. Some here this evening have objected to the reduction in trade union funding, perhaps arguing that we are against trade unions. To the best of my knowledge, all of this bench who have enjoyed long-term employment have belonged either to trade unions or professional societies, so we're not anti-workers collectives, just the opposite. I was a member of 2 unions as I moved, two associations as I moved along life's highway. We do, however, believe that union or society members should fund their representatives once the legal requirements have been met. So I ask the question of Labour, why should those on state pension, or any pension, or unable to work or not members of the unions concerned, pay towards their upkeep? This very point was put to me this morning by several now retired former trade union members. We support the deletion of the proposed 50,000 to support the Spice Girls concert at the Stadium of Light. 2 such commercial concerns should not benefit from public funds. We believe that they should be self-funding. After all, Mrs. Cannybody's corner shop has to pay its way in spite of the rent increases imposed by Siglian. Again, those same pensioners were objecting to this £50,000 just this morning. So I remind Council that council taxpayers in Sunderland will benefit if this amendment is adopted this evening, so I recommend it to the members and ask for their support. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pratt. Do you wish to reply?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I feel that I have no option but to reply. Thank you, Councillor McKnight, for stealing my when 2 become 1's line. You'll be punished later for that. But I'm just going to go through the items as laid out in Councillor Oliver's amendment. On deleting meals after full council meetings, I've made my position on this very clear. 8 meetings a year, which can go on to quite some time, and I think it's absolutely right that this council supplies a warm meal or a cold meal, if that is what they want, to our staff, our guests and our councillors, especially those that come straight from work. Some of us do bring a packed lunch, as I pointed out to Councillor O'Brien at the last meeting when we debated this, but not everybody can do that for the whole day. This is, as I said to the media earlier on today, just the worst example of pork barrel politics, where people are looking to take away from the real issue, which is the Liberal Democrats and the Conservatives coalition stand on austerity, which has cost this city nearly £300 million. So let's not talk about that. Let's talk about £5,000 on food for 8 council meetings a year. And it is a warm meal. The constant inflating of it to be an all-you-can-eat buffet with the inference of what goes with that is just shameful, to be honest. So I will not be agreeing with that, and I do not. We revisited it 5 weeks ago. I'll not be supporting it. We're not doing it. The reduced members' allowance issue. The councillors in this council have not had a rise in their basic allowance or in their special responsibility allowances for 7 years. Staff had rises, not very big ones, but the staff in this council have had rises. Councillors consistently in this chamber have year on year voted not to take a rise. So I have to disagree with you, Councillor Francis. We, the elected members, have taken a hit in our pocket because in real terms, all of us have seen an 18% reduction in the value of our allowance and any special responsibility allowances that we get, which we get because we're doing extra work. I have to remind everybody, councillors in this chamber, none of us decide what that value for that allowance or what those special responsibility allowances are. That is determined by the independent remuneration panel, who every year talk to councillors, find out what councillors think they should be having, and every year they say we should take a rise, and they determine what that rise should be, and they determine what the value should be, and they determine that based on the work that they see area committee chairs, cabinet deputies, not policy assistants, Councillor Oliver, what they do. And it's their decision on the value of that allowance. It's got nothing to do with the Labour Party. It's got nothing to do with the Conservative Party or the Liberal Democrats. We have no say in the matter of what allowances are paid to councillors. And every year, we refuse it. Because we have decided that we will not take any extra money whilst austerity is impacting on this council and the residents of this city. And as I've said, because of that, we've taken an 18% reduction in the spending power of that money. So I utterly disregard the reduced members' allowance argument because it's been done for political reasons. It's only about saying to people, oh yes, we don't agree with Labour, they're the people paying their allowances to themselves. Well, everybody in this chamber who gets an allowance is paying it to themselves. But we don't make the decision, and as I've said, I've got no doubt the Independent Remuneration Panel report, when it comes out next month, will advocate either a rise or a no change position, and we will agree whatever they tell us, because we don't disagree with them, it's their decision. Trade union facility time. We've lost 5,000 staff from within the council, more than that if you take into account education, but we still have nearly 3,000 staff in play. And it is a legal duty, as Councillor McKnight pointed out, that we must offer sensible facility time to staff to enable their union duties to support staff with employment issues. It's as simple as that. This is an annual scenario for the Conservatives. It is a cheap marker for them to be going on about, but I genuinely wish, gentlemen, that you would stop it. You are talking about denying support to workers. If our staff need support because the council has treated them badly, I want to know that they've got the broadest spectrum of trade union support to go to enable them to be represented. And that is what trade union facility time is about. That and, unfortunately, helping people, the thousands of people that we've lost over the last 9 years, leave this council because of your government's policies of austerity, which has lost us nearly £300 million. The Spice Girls. It's like it just keeps giving, honestly, Robert. It just... I can be honestly quite frank with you, Councillor Francis. If we had not given £50,000 to the football club, not the Spice Girls, the Spice Girls concert would not be happening. They did not have the money available to enable the work that they needed to do with partners to bring that concert to this city in June of this year. Now, we gave that money as an investment, and if we do generate £4 million over that weekend because of the spend that 50,000 plus people coming to the Stadium of Light, staying on a Friday and a Saturday, spending in our pubs, clubs, restaurants, cafes, getting in local taxis, going to local shops, doing whatever it is they're doing, that will be an £80 income for every pound spent. Now, I genuinely cannot think of a better rate of return I've ever heard in my life than that, which will be beneficial to the residents of Sunderland. And I have to tell you, you're quite wrong. I don't know who you were speaking to, Councillor Francis, but I'll just use the Echo Online polls. When they did one and over 2,000 people took part in it, 87% of the residents of Sunderland could not wait for the Spice Girls to come back. So you're very out of touch with the public you supposedly represent, gentlemen. And if Councillor Ledbetter was here, I would say ladies and gentlemen, but she is absent, unfortunately, tonight. Now, before I go on, just to put it in context, the Mayor, Ben Houchin, in Tees Valley Combined Authority, and fair play to him, but he has spent 350,000 bringing the big weekend to Middlesbrough. And do you know what? You've got to applaud him for that, because he's doing the job of trying to lift Middlesbrough and the Tees Valley area. Now, I think that that money's well spent, because he's looking out for the residents of the area he represents, but that is real money, 50,000 by comparison. So it's okay for you to complain about this city having aspirations to do things for its residents, right? But we'll not talk about what the Tory mayor down in Tees Valley is doing. You know, let's be fair. I think he's doing the right thing because he thinks that's the right thing, and I think we are doing the right thing by bringing this event here, because we do want Sunderland to be an event city. We do want people to be coming here because we can put events on, keep people safe, make them happy, and they want to come back, spend money, live, work and play here. Delete advertising and community vibe. I'm only going to say that if Conservative councillors did the work that Labour councillors did on the ground to produce good news stories, they would not be complaining about the fact that good news stories are going into the vibe without mentioning Labour councillors, but showing Labour councillors, because we're the ones doing the work. And if you don't like it, get off your behind and get into your community and do some work and send a good news story in, and it will be included in community vibe, because it's not, as you would refer to it in the past, Councillor, or Town Hall Pravda. It's about letting people see, because our residents have told us we don't tell them what we're doing. They've told us that we're not good enough at making them aware of what we're trying to put on and the events and the support that we give them. And that is what community vibe is about. And I think £9,000 is incredibly good value, and it's open to every councillor in this chamber to get benefit out of. So please avail yourself of the facility. Unlike leaflets which go out as we get close to election time, and we are getting close to one, funnily enough, surprising, what's in the budget tonight. Vibe goes out 4 times a year, you know, so the message is consistent. I genuinely think you need to be looking at why you're not in it, Robert, rather than complaining about the fact that I've given the option out there for councillors to get engaged.
Madam Mayor, can I move an extension for the leader to conclude his remarks?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The air show, genuinely, please keep saying things like this, because you'll end up with no Tory councillors in Sunderland. So I applaud you for bringing it. But you should check the Echo Online poll tonight. 67% of residents want the air show. Right? You're so out of touch with the people that you propose, you suggest that you represent. Right? And I checked it before I came in this chamber. Right? The air show is it's the best free air show in Europe. And officers hate me saying that, but I believe that's what it is. We get between 500,000 and 600,000 people over the weekend coming in and having a great time. Now, some of these people cannot afford a holiday. Some of these people are unemployed, low-waged, but they're able to get, if the weather's nice, a lovely weekend down at Seaburn and Roker with a great event going around them. I think if we did not strive to deliver that as a council, we would be letting the residents of this city down. So we will be absolutely not agreeing that amendment. Councillor Kelly has pointed out that we do try, and we haven't got sponsorship. But sponsors have been increasingly difficult to find after 9 years of austerity, funnily enough. So it leaves us with a shortfall which this council pays for, because that is part and parcel of good governance for the residents of the city, I'm afraid. If we're going to be a vibrant city, an event city and a destination city, the biggest air show in Europe is something that we have to support. And as Councillor Stewart said, all you're about is taking the fun out of Sunderland. And that's great. I'm going to use that as a strapline for you all going forward. Right? Take the fun out of Sunderland. That's what the Tories are about at the end of the day. I am very disappointed in your comments about area committee budget. You know, the one thing that I've always been very, very committed to is trying to ensure that local councillors, as frontline councillors, ward leaders, have access to funds locally to enable them to deliver projects from out there, not central, that enables them to do their job better. And once again, it's open to Conservative councillors, Liberal Democrat councillors, Labour councillors. It's there to be used. Now, this is something I'm told everybody wants. So we're trying to ensure that we're delivering a better package of service to the people, as I said, that we're elected to represent. The Labour group is committed to supporting our local communities and allowing them to make decisions about their own areas, and that is why this increased element of funding is happening. And if you don't like it, fine. We will take the plaudits for it, we will take the glory for it, and you will pay the price for it, Councillor Oliver. So, exactly. Right. Increased revenue from enforcement of litter, fly tipping and dog fouling. It's unprovable to go from £9,000 a year to £100,000 a year, gentlemen. Is that net? Is that £100,000 net? Is that after the cost of the enforcement officers that we need? Because currently, that is a question mark I have here. And we should be doing more fines, but this council's trying to be fair. We've tried to basically educate people, and I'm sure Councillor Wilson has said this many times before in this chamber. We have tried to educate people to realise that don't do it. Right? And we've moved to enforcement, and that's where we're going with it now. But to go from £9,000 to £100,000 is quite frankly a laughable increase, Councillor Oliver, which I'm sure you're aware. And it's the same with the parking revenue. And honestly, I'm not quite sure which Conservative councillor to talk to about this, because you flip-flop more than a beach cod on this. You're either talking about you're not as cheap as Newcastle. Oh, you're too cheap. We want it free. We don't want it free. And then you realise, well, we're actually making 1.2 million projected surplus, which we feed back into parking and everything within the budget for the council. Right? We've got the best value. We've got the cheapest parking offer in the region. It is the country, Councillor Mordy, in the country. Right? And here you are, wanting to raise our parking charges to stop people coming into the city centre, because that's what it'll do, which will damage us economically when we're trying to fix the city centre by bringing people into it. So we'll not be agreeing your proposals about parking charges, because as revenue charges go, it's a ridiculous concept. We have gone up and down over the years, and we're now in a position where we are making a return. And I think we've probably just about got the balance right, and that's where we need to stay for the moment. The transfer from General Reserve, right? It doesn't really help us with anything. It's not a prudent proposal. It's not a one-off for a specific. We really have to be very careful. And it shows the typical lack, I'm afraid, of financial understanding that sits within Conservative councillors in this chamber. To cut the council tax by 2%. I think it's outrageous of you, considering that it's an attempt to ameliorate part of the damage done by your party's £293 million in cuts to our budget. The fact that you're passporting the cost to people because central government won't pay for it, and it's effectively only hitting northern councils, which, funnily enough, are Labour controlled, while southern councils, the length of the country down there, are making surpluses and getting more income. I think is terrible. Terrible position. And you're supporting it, Councillor Oliver. We've had to do this, otherwise we will have to make more cuts in services. And that is what we've tried to do. And that was by my speech about it being something that we've had to do, not wanted to do, is the key point in this. But we won't be doing it. And now that Councillor Mullen has explained that it's park and cemetery wardens, because we were curious as to why 5 extra park wardens would make any difference to anything at all. When we've lost hundreds of responsive local services staff who used to do the parks, and once again that's all down to 9 years of austerity. But what I would say, Councillor Mullen, is if you'd come to me to speak to me about this, since it was a personal issue for you, I would have spoken with the Chief Exec about it as an item for consideration, and we can't do anything about it. So unfortunately I have to deny the amendment on it, because it's not right for us to try and change that now. But if there's an issue with cemetery and park wardens, I think we will look at that, but we need to have that discussion with officers going forward. And I do wish you'd just come and spoken to me beforehand, because when you put it in the context of why it's important to you, I understand that. So, Madam Mayor, sorry for taking so long, but I will be voting against this amendment, because I think it's 0.33 of 1% of our budget. It doesn't help us in any way, and it's the usual politics before a local election from the Conservative Party, and everybody must now see it for what it is. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Thank you everyone who's spoken. We're now going to vote on the amendment, please. Vote on the amendment.
Madam Mayor, there are 11 votes in favour, no abstentions and 44 votes against, and therefore the amendment is defeated.
Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to the second amendment. Councillor Hodgson, will you please move the amendment to the revenue budget by week account?
Thank you, Mayor Sunderland. Our amendment is only to the revenue budget. It finds an additional £765,000 of savings and puts that back in priority investments. The saving proposals we are putting forward are a one-off use of reserves with an ongoing saving arising from a move to 4 yearly all-up elections. A review of governance services, which incorporates a reduction of area committees and actually a reduction of the number of area committees to 3 coterminous with parliamentary constituency boundaries. A review and reduction of special responsibility allowances to save £250,000. The roles of the Mayor and the Deputy Mayor to be replaced by unpaid elected chairperson and deputy chairperson, and allowances removed. Reducing councillors' expenses, food and drink provision, subsistence allowance, and no longer providing free meals at council meetings. Introducing a workplace parking levy for elected members. Reviewing planning committees, reducing it to a single overarching committee, and commensurate reduction in allowances for councillors chairing those meetings. The removal of area committee people and place boards, incorporating them within the area committees, and commensurate reduction in allowances for councillors chairing those boards. And to cease purchasing space for articles in the Vibe magazine. And the investments we're proposing are reinstating £60,000 of disabled student travel support, reinstating a means-tested pest control service, reinstating a means-tested bulky item collection service, increasing funding to the library and museum service, to parking wardens, reinstating voluntary community sector contracts support, particularly for agencies supporting disabled and young people, introducing a self-financing dog warden service, which will be self-financing from 2020 to 2021, freezing the brown bin charge this year and limiting allotment rent rises to inflation only. Move the amendment, Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor O'Brien, you second the amendment.
I second the amendment, Madam Mayor, and reserve the right to speak.
Councillor Hudson, would you like to speak to your amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Sunderland. This amendment is quite simple. It seeks to rein in council allowances and free meals, reduce the cost of the Mayor's office, of committees and elections, and pass the savings on to some of the more vulnerable people in the city of Sunderland. We've several times made the case that councillors sharing the burden of cuts with residents has already been discussed again tonight, and we'd like to make it part of our amendment. I found it disappointing actually hearing Paul Stewart talking about cutbacks to jobs and services at the Civic Centre, but he didn't mention that Labour has red lines when it comes to making cuts, and that's any cuts that affect councillors. We're looking at charging for staff to park, for council staff to park in car parks, but not introducing charges for councillors. It's protecting the buffet and councillors' expenses, and Sunderland is still spending £250,000 per year on council allowances, more than Newcastle Council. Now, Graham Miller referred to the campaign against the sort of council buffet as the worst example of pork barrel politics. In my view, the worst example of pork barrel politics is cronyism. It's appointing the leadership of committees in a council, having only one party chair all the scrutiny committees, and having all those jobs for Labour colleagues. That, to me, looks very poor and smacks of cronyism. I was also a little concerned, actually, to hear Graham referring to the Independent Remuneration Committee, and Graham said, we will agree whatever they recommend this year, which may give me a little cause of concern about whether they're actually proposing to increase councillors' allowances this year, and I hope that's not the case. In our view, there's a huge saving to be made in reducing allowances and reducing the cost of area and planning committees and moving to all of elections. The council ought to, I think, at the very least, look into this seriously, which is not something it's chosen to do over the past few years. But it's what the public asked us to do in the budget consultation the council did a year ago, and I don't think it's right to simply ignore that fact. It has again been brought up in this meeting that this is something that the people of Sunderland do hold as a pretty common opinion, and I think we ought to listen to them. If you look at the savings that we're proposing, you'll see that, unlike those in the Conservative amendment, they don't, like the trade union cuts, affect the public. They only affect us here at the Civic Centre. And what we could do with that £765,000 is quite significant, and actually could benefit quite a lot of people. They're small changes, I don't argue with that, but they could benefit a lot of people. We think we can do more to fund the voluntary and charity sector, not least because we're asking so much more of them now. We don't think we should be penalising people for using a brown bin or keeping an allotment. These are things we need to encourage, certainly given that in a month or so's time people might need to be growing their own fruit and veg as we struggle to get it in from the continent. I think we can do more to help people who cannot afford pest control. Certainly when I look at my own ward, but then also when I look at Hendon, Southwick, Pallion, there are serious problems with bulky waste collections in these wards, with pest control, and it's clear that people can't afford it. I think people who are on benefits or on pensions really ought to be supported to access these services. That's something we asked last year, and it's something we're asking again this year, and we hope the leadership will consider it. We'd also like to put money back into the museum and library. I'm really pleased, as I will hope to say a bit later in the meeting, that the council leadership is taking such an enlightened view and investing so much in improving the museum and library. Really needs it, but it's a great move. What worries me about it is whether it's sustainable in terms of staff resource. I actually think that there is perhaps a need for a greater number of museum and library staff if that is to really be a success. So it's quite a simple and small change we're offering there. I am not pretending that this radically alters the funding situation Sunderland faces. It's blatantly obvious to anyone that the government is strangling local authorities. The point we're making this evening is really to reiterate that councillors must share the burden. What we have proposed is a simple, completely feasible and costed way in which we can do that together. Thank you, Mayor Sunderland.
Councillor Dixon.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There's a distinction tonight between our amendment and that of the Liberal Democrats. And there is little doubt in my mind that the Liberal Democrats have used this budget debate to advocate the contempt of the committee system on this council. As shown over the years, they've had nothing but contempt for the committee system, and sometimes they prove that by not turning up at meetings. In my opinion, this is where we disagree. So you don't necessarily have to change the system of committees in order to save cost. We're with them on allowances, as has been clearly mentioned tonight. Councillor Oliver can mention it again. But to reduce or scrap committees that are either running okay or could be improved with ongoing improvement, which would happen, really it's the allowances that's our main point. And I really do find myself getting quite cross with the suggestions they've made in order to save money. For example, the planning committee. We would certainly not go down the route of one overarching committee. I just can't see in a million years how this could work at all. It was difficult enough organising 3 committees on the same day. And with the possible length of the meetings, you might have to pay for an overnight stay, never mind sharing time. It would eliminate members from the planning procedure. Local expertise and knowledge would be lost. Planning committees allow so-called backbench councillors to make citywide contributions to the system of local government. This would take it away, have a very large number of people, and I suggest it just wouldn't work. So while I accept procedures can be improved, we again, to stress, believe that allowances are our main argument. An overarching committee to me is too centralised, too bureaucratic, covering a mass area, and with the inevitable reduction in numbers, how many opposition councillors will be on them. And this is something that we really do care about. We do like to take our place on committees, unlike other parties. And we would fight for our place on it, so this is a non-starter as far as I'm concerned. Area committees, well, this is going to be a tricky one tonight because you've had a go at us for not accepting an increase. Now I'm going to have a go at the Liberals for the reduction. And I really do feel very, very strongly about this, that a reduction in the budget of £100,000 for some of the most vulnerable people in our city is an absolute disgrace, quite frankly. Moving the committees from 3 down to 3, so we've got the planning committee down to 1, we've got the area committees down to 3. The current committee that I'm on is the East area. Ward councils work collectively, irrespective of the political party. There's a genuine interest and there's expertise in that area, and this just would be ruled by increasing the geographical basis of the committees. But where I really do get cross tonight is the actual system of getting rid of place boards and people boards. I mean, this is really unbelievable. I mean, this system was created with the inspiration of your late leader and our late leader, Paul Watson. And a lot of really important work is done by these 2 boards. The schemes that go on, I mean, I'm involved in community hubs, as are other councillors, carers, youth work, people who have got difficulties, learning difficulties, and all of this is going to be scrapped by the Liberals. Quite frankly, it's a disgrace. And that's something which is why I can't accept this amendment, because of that. So I agree with the sentiment about allowances, but as far as I'm concerned, there's no way I can support that based on those. The deputy mayor, the mayor and deputy mayor, we kind of half agree. I think the allowances should be looked at. I really do. As far as I'm concerned, a mayor or a deputy mayor has the honour of representing, our city. And when they look back on their time as mayor or deputy mayor, they'll not be thinking about the allowance, they'll be thinking about the honour. They do a lot of work, which I don't think the Liberals are too
but I do agree with them that the actual allowances should be looked at. I think the Labour Party yourselves have made an absolute mess about the meals, I really do. We are paying £9.50 for the pleasure of a meal afterwards. We are paying, we're not on the coattails of anybody. I can't imagine Councillor Francis on the coattails of anybody. And this is something that we basically think is right. That for 8 meetings is at £9.50. It's not a lot of money, and it gives a very good message to the people of Sunderland. And again, just like support the Liberals are getting at, I did pass committee room number 2 on Monday, and outside there was lots of good quality buffet food which had been left uneaten. I don't know what was going on in that committee room, but that's an example of waste. What was it? Well, they should have eaten more, because they left a heck of a lot. It's a worthy thing, but you know what I'm getting at. It's waste, and it shouldn't be the case. So basically, we feel very strongly that the committees, especially area committees, I follow Councillor Kelly. I'm very passionate about area committees and the place boards and the people board that I represent. I go into my ward, and what Councillor Miller said is nonsense. Councillors work very hard, and I hope it was tongue-in-cheek, because it was slightly uncalled for, if I may say so. So here, I'm going to oppose the Liberal Democrat amendment because of the way in which it's going to cut essential services and for people least advantaged in our society, and for that reason, ask the Liberal not to support the amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dixon. Councillor Mordy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, just rise to oppose the amendment by the Liberals, and really just to focus on the issue of the council elections. I think it's an absolute affront to democracy to deny the people of Sunderland the opportunity to express an opinion on the quality or otherwise of their local councillors 3 years out of 4 years is what we support on this side of the chamber. And I think to reduce to all-out elections once every 4 years is, again, just anti-democratic. Councillor Watson, in his comments, mentioned the fact that Labour councillors hold a lot of the committee chairs, or all the committee chairs. The simple fact of the matter, Councillor Hodgson, is that the people of Sunderland every year elect the Labour Party to run this city. This is an attempt by the Liberal Democrats to govern from third place. They have to admit that they are routinely rejected at the polls by the people of Sunderland, and long may that continue, Madam Mayor. The final thing I just want to mention is in relation to the area committees, and I agree with a lot of what Councillor Dixon said. This money, to oppose this money is, in my opinion, a disgrace. This money goes directly to some of the most vulnerable people in our wards. It's an ability of communities to work with their local councillors to effect real change. Some of the funding that goes direct to the front line, and to oppose it for what effectively is a populist policy of the worst kind, Madam Mayor, I think is a disgrace. So I ask colleagues to oppose this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mordy. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just like my colleague, I'll not be supporting the amendments that have been put forward by the Liberal Democrats. In doing so, I'd like to concentrate on a couple of areas. First of all, in relation to the various references to council allowances and subsistence allowances, and well, yeah, there's a whole list of them there. I'm not going to go through them all, but what it shows is there's a theme here, and it's almost anti-councillor. I sometimes wonder why they want to be councillors, in the sense that they always seem to be attacking anything that might suggest that elected members will have the opportunity to take up a position on this council and not have another job anywhere else. I mean, how else is somebody supposed to survive if they don't have a council allowance? And we should take up the opportunity to be involved in the council. But anyway, what I would like to see is that
the Liberal Democrats and the Tories there's a common theme here, and that is when in opposition, they'll oppose council allowances, and surprise, surprise, Liberal Democrats are no different. As soon as they get into power, they do exactly the same as the Conservatives, and they can't get hold of the money quick enough. Madam Mayor, I mean, a few examples, and what I'm doing is I'm going to wind the leader up by giving some examples of what the leaders get. There's not many Liberal Democrat controlled authorities after me. But in Sutton, the leader gets £42,000, so that's a little bit more than you. So yeah, that'll upset you now. Yeah. Okay, Bedford, the leader there, the nice Liberal there, who's really must have a smile on his face, gets £62,500, which is a huge amount. So you should be getting deep tears now.
Crying.
But that's you know, they're Watford, where they recently took control. A whopping 66,000 there for the Liberal Democrat leader of that council. Madam Mayor, there is a consistency here that in opposition, let's oppose allowances. When we get into power, let's keep them and let's have more of them. And that's for both of those parties, not one in particular. So I would oppose their suggestions with regards to what they propose for council allowances. If we take the issue of democracy, as Councillor Modi said, you either believe in democracy or not, and I get the feeling that perhaps that they're not quite too sure. My own view is you can't get enough of democracy, you can't get enough of the opportunity to be able to vote, and there should be more elections, not less. I have to admit, tempted though to actually go into all of the elections, at least just for once, and that would mean we'll get rid of all the views on the one go. That's tempting, it is tempting. But the truth is, you cannot put a price on the value of someone's vote. You can never have too much democracy, and we need to involve local residents more, not less, in the decision making of this city, and also their local neighbourhoods, which is why I'm fundamentally opposed to the proposal. We need to be looking at more ways to ensure democratic involvement of the people of this city, not less. And I think through the leadership of the Labour Party here, it's certainly our intention, and I'm not going to give anything away, but certainly when we release our manifesto, it will show that there's a real firm commitment to ensure greater democracy in this city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor McKnight.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Okay, I will be opposing this amendment, you probably gather. Quite frankly, I call bull, to be honest. This is just too easy. The Fib Dems, once again, grandstanding about councillors' expenses. Let me tell you something, for your information, I don't claim expenses. I am, however, like most of my colleagues on this side of the chamber, granted an allowance. Councillor Hodgson and his colleagues are genuinely sincere about putting allowances. I challenge him here and now, for him and his deputy, to hand back their special responsibility allowance, or even a significant proportion of his basic allowance for all his colleagues. I somehow don't think that will happen, ladies and gentlemen, for some reason. With regard to cronyism, and not having a chair of a committee, I challenge him to get him and his members to regularly actually turn up. That would be a real good start. It's actually quite pathetic when you haven't got a committee and a chair that doesn't turn up. Here, what do I know? So, just to keep it nice and very succinct, Madam Mayor, once again this is grandstanding on Councillor Hodgson's part, the brief Sunderland or social media soundbite. Totally laughable.
Thank you, Councillor McKnight. Councillor Lawson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I had intended sitting quietly tonight and not contributing to this debate, but I can't sit back and listen to the attack on area committees. And I wonder if the Lib Dem councillors are actually aware of the work that area committees do. Do they turn up to the meetings, or do they do what they usually do and